Yo, what's up, YouTube? It's me, TJ, with my new series, Take Tuesday. It's a chance for us to learn about new NeoVim stuff. Yeah, so it's what we do on stream on Tuesday mornings, and we're going to be, like I mentioned, learning about existing plugins that I already use. Maybe I don't know how to use them very well, or exploring completely new plugins that I want to put into my workflow. And we'll be able to share all of that with you as we go. So with that, why don't we climb on in for this new series, Take Tuesday. What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the very first Take Tuesday. This week, we're going to be talking about nvim-cmp, and actually this is sort of just a general guide towards what my current autocomplete sort of setup and experiences within NeoVim. We'll talk a little bit about where I came from before, why we're here on nvim-cmp, what I really like about it. We'll explore how you can do some of the really simple configuration, really simple setup. We'll move into some options that I think are really helpful in sort of customizing the experience to be just the way that you like it. And then we'll sort of wrap everything up with building our own example source for nvim-cmp that can do stuff like complete issue numbers from GitHub, depending on which repository you're in. So it'll just be kind of like we're going to work through it, talk about it, and hope you enjoy it. If you do enjoy this style and there's other plugins that you want me to do, please comment or contact me on Twitter or whatever. I'm really looking for feedback about this new series that we're trying out. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So a lot of you know that at one point I was using completion nvim. This was probably one of the very first Lua async style completion frameworks that are sort of in this new batch or new generation of Lua plugins for NeoVim. However, over time, both there was a difficulty with we didn't have someone that wanted to maintain the project, as well as the scope became too large. So I actually have moved off completion nvim for quite a while by the time that this video came out. I actually moved over to nvim-cmp. So notice this is C-O-M-P-E, and this became in a lot of ways the de facto standard for a lot of people that were playing around with this. But ultimately, the author of this plugin recognized that there were some, I will say, mistakes, because I think the solutions made in nvim-cmp are much better than this. Effectively, lots of problems were things like sources had to be defined in certain places. It wasn't very extensible. It encompassed too many things in one repository, which made doing things like maintenance and bug reports and reproducibility really difficult. And so actually, the author eventually deprecated nvim-cmp. So if you're looking here, you'll notice that nvim-cmp is deprecated. And now we get to where I am today, which is on nvim-cmp. Here's just a really short list of the features of nvim-cmp. I think sort of the best parts about nvim-cmp are this idea that most, if not all, sort of configuration points can be customized via Lua functions, which lets you sort of really customize and create an experience that's exactly the way that you want. And additionally, this auto-completion plugin was really designed with a lot of the features that are required for a proper LSP experience, which also just happens to sort of create then this really nicely architected, well-rounded, well-featured plugin that allows you to do sort of any of the things that you'd expect from a modern auto-completion style plugin. And the last thing that I personally love about nvim-cmp is that the main repository, the main place where the development's happening, is just the engine for doing all of the interesting things for completion. So it doesn't try and implement a bunch of different sources right here, which as we go through, you'll see that, you have to install a few more plugins to get started. But I think that this style and architecture works really well for autocomplete sources. If you don't like how nvim-cmp decides what buffer words to suggest or things like that, well, you could just write your own, plug that in over top, and allow that to happen. And the other nice thing is that this really lets the ecosystem sort of evolve as it's going to make sure that we're picking the best things and the best things for you going forward. And that's one of the things that I really have fun playing around within NeoVim. All right, we got some code. I know that's why everybody's here, so let's try and work through this, right? The first thing you're going to need to do, and all of this, by the way, is detailed in nvim-cmp's README, super detailed, very easy to follow, I think, but we'll just walk through how I've got it in my setup. And of course, I will post links in the description below, classic YouTuber style, of course. By the way, this is time where I'm going to mention, if you're not subscribed, feel free to subscribe. If you haven't hit the bell, smash it. And of course, feel free to click that like button as well. Moving on, we'll need to install nvim-cmp. As I mentioned, this part of the plugin is really the core engine. This is what does all of the really interesting bits for nvim-cmp as a whole. However, what you'll need to do in addition to that is install the sources that you want. If all you did was install nvim-cmp, you wouldn't be getting anything interesting coming out next. What you need to do is install these other sources, and you don't have to install all of these, but I'll just walk through what each one does. Nvim-cmp buffer basically completes words from the current buffer that you're in. So this is really nice for completing things, even when sometimes you don't have autocomplete or you want to complete something in comments, all that kind of good stuff, or you're writing markdown, stuff like that. Comp path is a plugin to help you complete files. So it'll just detect when it looks like you're typing a file, complete those for you. nvim-lua is actually a really cool one if you're writing Lua or doing Lua development for things, because it basically has a bunch of special NeoVim knowledge and it will apply really nice completions. For example, we can see something like this where I'm actually getting completions for all of the different API functions. So that's super nice. And then the next one that I think is very, very important for anybody using built-in LSP is to get comp nvim LSP. This is where things start to really shine. I'll show a few examples later, but this is how you can get super easy auto import on complete if the LSP supports that, of course, as well as doing other things just like moving between snippets, expanding snippets, things like that. The last thing to note, and this plugin here will differ depending on which snippets plugin you use. I use Lua Snips, and I do hope to make Take Tuesday about Lua Snips at some point in the future. But comp doesn't ship with a snippets sort of execution engine, plugin, whatever you want to call it. That actually relies on other people to do that. So you'll have to install whichever snippets plugin that you want to do, and then you can do that. So I'm using Lua Snips, so I installed this plugin. All right, sweet. So we've got all this stuff installed. What comes next? Well, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to, somewhere in Lua code, either in your init.lua or some Lua required function, or within a big Lua block inside of init.vim, either way will work, is you'll need to start doing comp setup. So comp setup is sort of your hub or home place where you're doing all of the configuration for comp. A bunch of the different mappings are described in the README. The important ones for me are doing things like setting up something to do confirm. This will tell Compy that it needs to do stuff like apply those additional text edits you could be getting from the LSP when you're completing, or other items like that. I know that many of you out there like to hit tab and have that do completion. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm just saying that that's not how I do it, and I think it's bad and it's wrong. Anyways, so if you wanted to do that, it's quite easy to do. You can read about a little bit in the README. I have these snippets available in sort of my configuration for if you wanted to just basically copy paste these to work for you, and you can do tab and shift tab to move between the next item and the previous item. My only hope, my only ask is before you copy paste this, please at least just read helps in completion, because it gives you a lot of really great info about things that are just built into Vim or NeoVim for that matter, and that you should sort of know generally. This will work on any machine, anywhere, etc. So they're just good things for you to learn and to know about. So if you don't, you should just take some time to read that, and then I will allow the tab, shift, tab stuff to be applied. But it will hurt me. So now that you've got your mapping set up, the very important next step is you need to tell comp what sources to use. Now, remember, comp is sort of like this engine or architecture sort of idea that other sources use to provide their completions. So what you need to do is you need to tell nvim-cmp which sources you want to enable globally. We'll talk in a little bit about how to enable it on a per buffer basis, but you want to do these sort of globally and set them up so that as soon as you start typing, you can get that autocomplete going. Once you do that, there are a few things that you should know about how these sources are set up. So I thought this was super cool, which is that the order that you put the sources in is actually sort of an automatic ranking of priority of where you would like these completion items from each source to show up. So if you want sort of, for me, like vim.api sort of completions to show up before just words from the buffer like this, then you can put it higher in that list. You can also optionally specify the keyword argument sort of priority and set some number like 50 or whatever, and you can manage that yourself. But I've found just doing this sort of ordering works just fine for me. Another really cool thing that you can do is you can set the keyword length argument here when you're inside for each source. This is really nice because when you start typing something, it won't start suggesting those things until you've typed enough letters. So if I'm inside of a comment here and I start typing something like key, notice how I don't have completion yet. I actually don't want completion for when I've just typed the first few characters, right? But as soon as I cross 5 characters, which is my keyword length, it's going to start suggesting things from the buffer. I find this really nice because a lot of the times I don't want the window to open or close or do all these other things. I know what I want to type for short words, but once I get to these longer words that maybe I'm going to have a typo or going to do something else dumb, you can do that. So that's a really nice sort of configuration point that I'd like to point out. The other one that I don't currently have on any of mine, but is also possible to do, is that you can specify the max item count for something. So if you think that like you're just getting tons and tons of options from one source, but you don't actually want that many, you can set max item count to limit that, and maybe that'll bring less clutter to the completions that you have. I think it's possible that more will come over time, but these are just the ones at the time of writing that I thought are interesting to share with all of you. Another thing to note as we're looking through this is that this nvim-lua source, understandably, you might think, well, isn't that only useful inside of Lua functions or inside of Lua files? And yes, that's true, it is. But actually, the source itself knows that it's only useful inside of Lua, so it only enables itself inside of Lua. However, if you were looking to do that yourself, you can actually do something like this, where you set some auto command and a file type, and then you can say require comp setup buffer. This is the important part. You can call setup for a buffer, and you could say additional sources that you would want to run. Now note, this is additional sources. The global ones will still be available, so you don't have to like redo the list every time. You just go right ahead and say the sources that you want to add. So you could add nvim-lua in this case. I left mine on all the time because the source handles it itself, but I just wanted to make you aware that that's a possibility for both. And now, since we've been talking this whole time, you're probably wondering,
hey TJ, what's this GH issues one?
Well, we're going to get to that one later. You'll just have to wait till the end of the video. Next up is snippets, and you don't have to do a whole lot to get snippets working for nvim-cmp, but the thing that you need to know is that you do have to have some snippets plugin, and that there's a little sort of tidbit of code that you have to put in. If you're doing Lua snips, then this is all the code that you have to put in to basically get snippets enabled inside of nvim-cmp. I think there's stuff for vsnips, maybe altisnips, I don't know, but I imagine it wouldn't be incredibly difficult to add some of those things. So if you're using nvim-cmp and you have snippets and you want LSP snippets to get expanded correctly, you need to do something like this at some point. I think there's recipes in the README. You can just copy paste any of those for whichever snippets plugin you are currently using. One thing that I thought was super cool is that you actually have the ability to sort of change the formatting of each source and the way that they show up and do all sorts of different and interesting things. I have the plugin LSP kind, which I'll also link in the description, which allows for sort of these really nice, bonus sort of colors here and icons that I think are pretty with some bonus information. But you also note that I get this, I'll call it like a source marker or a menu item for where this is actually coming from. And you can customize that as well using LSP kind. There's not too much to it, and there's a snippet that you can once again copy and paste, or you can copy and paste from me. But the thing that's cool is if you wanted to say some different name or different thing, or you wanted to add your own different menus, you can see where each source is coming from, which which is good for doing things like selecting a completion and making sure that you're not just picking some word that's in your buffer, but you're actually picking like the LSP suggestion that you expect to be getting when you're typing. So that's really nice, and I like how this is sort of all just Lua functions all the way down, where we're able to add these customizations to look exactly the way that I would like or that you would like, instead of trying to just figure out what the one way for everybody would be. All right, at the time of this video, there are 2 experimental features. I love the new menu. This is not actually the normal completion menu. A bunch of work went into doing things where you sort of get this beautiful new menu that's floating with additional abilities to add extra highlights, and we'll talk about customizing those highlights in a moment. But so I turn off the native menu and I'm using the beautiful new menu that is the default. I imagine over time this menu option may get removed, but I really like the way that the menu is now with this sort of new non-native menu. The second experimental option that I thought was really cool, I haven't decided if I love it, if I'm going to keep it for a long time or not, but it's this ghost text API. And what you can see is that actually, like, as I'm typing, it puts NeoVim's virtual text in this area here, but that's not actually inserted yet into the buffer. So this is really cool for just looking sweet, I guess. I turned it on because I think it looks cool. I'm going to keep it on for a few days and see. Maybe next time I'll let everybody know what I ended up choosing, to whether I'll keep it or not. But I just thought it was really cool to be able to do this, and so I left it. You might think it's cool, or you might think it's not super easy to turn it on and off with this flag. All right, here you'll see that here's an example of me turning on a particular source within different file types. So SQL, MySQL, PL SQL, any of these different kinds of SQL files. I turn on Vim Dadbod completion. Very cool plugin. You can check it out. The link will be in the description as well. But this is just a note and an example for all of you. If you look in my .dot files later, you will be able to see how I'm doing sort of this conditional file type only configuration. One other thing to note is that it's possible to disable very easily for different file types or under certain events nvim-cmp. All you have to do is actually call require comp.setup.buffer and set enabled equals false, and that will immediately turn comp off for that buffer. So this is useful for things like Telescope, but nvim-cmp already knows not to turn on in Telescope via some settings that we set in Telescope. So basically we're playing nice with each other the way it is right now, but if you needed to do that or it wasn't working for some reason, you could add this additional auto command to your setup, and that'll confirm and make sure that nvim-cmp doesn't turn on in those kinds of buffers. All right, last up in sort of this just config section is talking about being able to do different highlights. I think it's pretty cool. You can actually customize each of the different things in the window for nvim-cmp to give exactly the sort of appearance that you want. These highlights are listed in the README. At the time of this video, these are the only ones available. I'm using a plugin that I wrote a while ago called Color Buddy to sort of wrap some of these APIs and make it a little bit easier for me to write, but it's very cool because this means you can do things like highlight deprecated things different from regular suggestions. You can do different kinds of text for the suggestions for when I type group. We see how this is like purple right now. If we change this to be something like error, this is the error group, so it'd be linked to the error group, and we run this and I do group. Notice how this changed. So you can pick whichever colors work well for you. I like these colors so far. I might change them around as I'm exploring, but I found that this is quite nice, sort of hiding this menu part in the background but still visible, and doing other parts with this is sort of just the normal color that I have for everything else. So that's the last of sort of the basic configuration, the basic things that you can do to really easily start making nvim-cmp look exactly the way that you want it to look. All right, so before we get into showing exactly how you could make your own source, I just want to highlight a few of the very cool and interesting features that you sort of get just as soon as you've configured nvim-cmp. Now, of course, the main reason that I'm showing this is a Rust file. I write Rust now. If you didn't know, you can come check out on my stream. I've been writing Rust for almost a month now, I'd say, and it pretty much defines my life. I can't talk about anything else, and I have to make sure that Rust is probably mentioned in every video going forward sort of like contractually. But anyways, the cool part about nvim-comp is you can do something like this. Let's say you're defining some new function and you want to return a hash map. Okay, right? So this is a hash map. This is the standard collections for it. I don't want to have to type anything else. So what actually I can do is I can accept this answer. For me, that's Control Y. You could make it whatever character you want, maybe enter or anything like that. And when you accept that, notice that now at the top of the file, that import was just scooped right up and added there. So there wasn't anything extra I had to do. That's working through the LSP, and the LSP basically sends additional edits that the completion engine should do if an item is selected. So in this case, that was adding that hash map. So I think that that's just super cool and a really interesting thing that makes me a lot more productive. I hate having to pick out or like go and write those different imports or anything like that. If the LSP can do it for me, then I'm happy to let it do that work. So that was the first part, right? Was this ability to add imports. The second thing is that because comp integrates well with snippet managers, you can actually sort of use snippets that come back from the LSP about edits that you should do. So for example, if I wanted to map and I wanted to insert something into this map, I actually get a function that has K and V, right? So you'll see that I can put in a key and a value, right? And the ghost text is showing what's going to be there. So I kind of enjoying that ghost text. I think it's good so far. So if I accept this completion, notice that now we've inserted the K and the V and my cursor is on the K, right? So I can't point that far, it's this way, but it's on the K now. So if I put 5 here, I can press my jump to next thing in snippet button, which would be whatever it is for you. And notice I go immediately to the V, and now I could type 10, I can say go to the next thing. Now I'm at the end of the line and I can just press this and continue moving. Right, so I really like how nvim-comp integrates so well with my existing snippet manager. I didn't have to learn new keyboard shortcuts. I didn't have to do anything else. None of that good stuff. I just used and reused the same mappings and everything that I have with my existing snippet manager, and comp uses that snippet manager to parse and expand the snippet that comes back from LSP. So I think this is really helpful, and I use this a ton for when I'm calling methods that I'm not as familiar with or other things like that where I need to move through. It's just really helpful. Okay, before I show you how we're going to do this, I just want to show you what we're aiming to do. This is a pretty cool thing, I think, because it just shows how easy it is to start extending nvim-comp into doing things that work for you the way that you're hoping for, to make you a little bit more productive, and also to have fun, which is always one of my mantras for working with NeoVim, right? So in this case, I'm inside of a git commit buffer here. I'm about to make a commit, and supposedly in this case, I fix an issue. Now, usually that's not the way it works. Obviously, I'm usually creating issues, but let's suppose in this hypothetical universe, I'm actually able to close an issue. What I could do is I could type closes, and then when I type this octothorpe, notice that I get a list of the open issues inside of this repository. When I cycle through them, I actually see the title and the body of that issue, so I can make sure that when I write closes and I put this into my commit message, it is actually the one that I want to close. So that's great, and then I could write more info here, etc. So that's what our goal is. That's what I'm going to show you how I created, and just using very, very simple code for nvim-comp, and literally just under 70 lines of code. So it's pretty exciting. Let's hop over there. All right, so we're going to walk through how we created the source, and I think you'll be surprised, hopefully pleasantly, at how easy it is to make a new source. I could imagine actually creating several of these for just different situations where I find myself repeatedly doing something where I know that there is a programmatic solution to select from one of some items, right? So I think this is really nice to know how to do, and we're just going to show you how to extend. So what do you need to do? To create a new source, basically what you're going to do is make a new Lua, we'll say object, but it's just a table with a few different methods that need to be there. The first thing is source.new. This is very simple, it just returns a new object. You can do any initialization you need to do here. If you want to add caching or fields or anything like that, this is where you would do that. The main sort of meat or the big bulk of what we're going to be doing is inside of this complete function. This gets called by nvim-cmp and calls your source and asks for the results. But instead of sort of synchronously grabbing those results, what nvim-cmp does that's very nice is it gives you this higher order function, basically just this callback that you can call whenever you have results to give. So this is really nice because what we can do is we can actually run an executable, make some requests, and when that request is done, we can call the callback with the appropriate items. So that's what we're going to do. We do a little bit of, it's not strictly necessary, but it's just nice if you're going to make a request to someone else's API, just consider caching it if you know it's going to be the same like all the time. So we're just going to cache it basically for this, one session to make sure that we're not constantly asking the same question to the API. In the not cached case, what are we going to do? We're just going to ask GitHub, hey, can you give us the issues? List them. I just asked for the top 1,000. If you have more than 1,000 open issues, you could change this number, or you could make it dynamic or whatever you need to do. We asked for the results back in JSON because that makes it much easier for us to parse. And then we just ask for the fields title, number, and body because we don't need any of the other fields like assignee. You could imagine doing this or even filtering by issues that are assigned to you or whatever it is, but I didn't think that I needed to go there. This provided plenty of good stuff for me and was already plenty fast enough. So I'm using Plenary's job API, but you could do this with job start or other things as well if you really wanted to. It's not super difficult to imagine how you do that. So what this does is this function runs when the job exits. We can get the results. We try and decode them. If that fails, we just short circuit out. Nothing crazy there. So up to now, we haven't done anything very exciting. In fact, we can show exactly what we're doing. If I went to here and I ran gh issue list 1,000, we can see exactly what the result would look like. So you could test this out outside of NeoVim, outside of here, just making sure that you're getting exactly what you want. Once we do that, we just collect a bunch of items, which for us means we're going to loop over this list of JSON values that have body, number, and title, and we just need to put them into a format that nvim-cmp can understand. So what we do is we just make sure that we don't have any random character terms that we don't want. We put these items inside of here. We can put a £sign in front of the label, the octothorpe, if you will, just so that it looks exactly how you'd normally write an issue number inside of GitHub or something like that. We add this bonus documentation, and nvim-cmp handles all the difficult, annoying stuff about formatting that, making sure to apply the right file type, if applicable, all this other sort of stuff. All I have to do is say what I want the label and the documentation to be, and nvim-cmp will handle the rest. We call the callback with these items, and then we just cache the result. We don't have to cache, but like I said, I think it's good practice for us to be able to do that. And that's it. That does all the hard work. Once you implement this far, when I start typing, it will go and search for things that map, and nvim-cmp handles putting these into the same thing, sorting on priority, etc., etc. I just had to write this little snippet of code. There's a couple other cool things, though, that we do further down in this file. The first one is that we add a trigger character, which basically says only trigger this completion when I type these characters or some patterns that match these characters. In this case, I only ever want to call this completion when I type an octothorpe, because that's the only time that I'm ever going to reference issues. Other times I don't need it. So this makes it so that you can control that on a per source basis. The other note is that you can control when sources are available, and I automatically made it so that we only turn the source on when the file type is set to git commit. So with all these things together, the very last thing that you need to do is just register the source with a name and then call source new, which basically just says, hey, give me that new thing that I need to be able to call. After we do that, we're all done. And that gives us exactly that experience that I just showed you before to be able to complete the issues and show all the documentation. You could totally imagine extending this to do PR numbers if you wanted for when you're making comments or anything else like that. I'll probably write some more for myself as well. All right. And with that, that's the quick overview, the general overview of nvim-cmp. Honestly, I've been super happy, super pleased with the plugin. I've been having a lot of fun. It feels fast, it feels responsive, it feels configurable, it feels complete. A lot of it just feels really, really good. I really highly recommend this. If you're not interested in trying this one out, there's another really interesting plugin called coke-nvim, which is actually different from coc-nvim. coke-nvim is another completion engine that's out there that I've heard really, really good things about. It's very fast, very quick, and a lot of people like it a lot. So you could consider trying this one instead. For now, I'll stick with nvim-cmp because I'm enjoying it. You could also try coc.nvim if you're not interested in any of these or you want something that works with Vim. I really hope that you found this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. If you have any suggestions for other plugins, let me know. If you liked or didn't like this format, also please let me know. Mostly what I'm looking for is just some feedback to make sure that I'm hitting exactly what you're looking for, that you found this useful. It takes a while to put together these videos and all that good stuff, so I want to make sure that I'm helping the best that I can. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed take 1 of Take Tuesday, and feel free to stop by on Twitch Tuesday mornings Eastern time to learn some more about plugins with me as we explore. Thanks everybody. I hope you have a great day. Keep on neo-vimming.